All right, you guys, welcome to another episode of The Common Theory. As always, I'm here with my man Dallas, and today we're going to be continuing our series about you're building something wrong. And today we have our man Izlain. And who better to help us out but someone who's actively be playing what we're going to be discussing today, which is mid-range. So before we even start and kind of get to the nitty gritty, I just wanted to put two little notions out there for you guys to know. And we're going to be talking about kind of like the differences between control and mid range and kind of relating one to the other. And pretty much the two big aspects are going to be proactive versus reactive. And really delving deep into the mid range core and why this deck, or decks plural, are doing what they're doing in the format and why they're currently succeeding. And really, that's kind of why we have Izlain here with us today, is because he's been pretty much pioneering a deck. And why not have him here and have him talk about it and discuss it with us? So, Dallas, you got anything to add to this, or?
Think we're ready to go. So we'll go ahead and kick it off with Izlain's deck. If you want to take it away and give us a quick little overview, Izlain.
Yeah, for sure. So, they're from what I've seen of the format, having played for a year and a half or so, off and on. Obviously not as dedicated as some players, but more dedicated within the last 6 months or so. Um, Main thing I saw was that like combo decks seemed to be running around and just doing what they want to do. And then there were aggro decks that were kind of combating that by trying to kill the combo players before the combo players could go off. And then there was like some kind of sort of control decks, but like nothing was really working, it didn't seem. All the stuff that I saw was like, high end combos. That's why I started playing Malcolm Kedis right away, because it was like, okay, I can win on turn 4, and if they don't, make them have it. If they don't have it, you just win. Cool. And then if not, you try again next turn, or the next turn, or the next turn, and sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. But it felt pretty strong. But then I saw stuff like Abdel, playing against Gator in that first Sanctuary tournament, and then seeing him take the whole thing, it was like, okay, this is combo, but it's also slow combo. And it felt, not to say that that's a mid-range deck, but it just felt more like that's the kind of game plan you want. Don't be the guy that's going first, because you're going to get stopped. Unless, you're going to get lucky sometimes, but like probably a percentage of the time, you're just going to get stopped. So being the guy that's going first is bad. Being the guy that has the biggest board with aggro, like gut leader or something, for instance, having a huge field of tokens that's going to put a lot of pressure on the rest of the table is going to mean you're going to get yourself into a 3v1, just the same as the guy that tried to combo first. So what does that leave? It really leaves like this mid-rangey, control-y kind of third, to the rock paper scissor. It's the next piece that it just wasn't really there. And Sivris Cloakwood, so at some point years ago, I played Pauper Commander, and it was just like, we thought it was cool to be able to use creatures. So I built like a dumb Drake deck. I can't even, it was Azorius Flyers, basically. I can't even remember the name of the card that I used, but that ended up being one of my more popular videos on my YouTube channel. So I was like, there's an audience here for this. Maybe I should try and do some more. So beginning of last year, or mid somewhere last year, I started playing, or started putting out there that I wanted to play with people. And so I've played with Clay and you guys, Ryan, and a lot of known quantities that are out there. Just started getting people to come on stream and play. And around that time, the Baldur's Gate Commanders Legends 2 came out, and it had all of these unique, weird commanders with these backgrounds. And the CDH community pretty much shit on it. And because that's my community, like, I was like, well, but I still feel like there's something here. Like, we should be able to use these in some way. And to be fair, some of them have come around and have become CDH builds, but not too many. But I noticed that the Pauper Commander sphere, like, this felt really good. So this list, and there's one other list that I've been brewing recently as well, that I created right there at the beginning. And the deck that I have now is very much different from the deck that I started with, but they were kind of the things that I was attracted to. Sivris immediately looked to synergize the best with Cloakwood Hermit, just because it's like, you're already sacking things, why not get more value back to sack more things? So it just seemed like an engine on wheels. And then it's crazy card advantage, and I think that's the thing that gets overlooked more than anything. It's like you look at it and you're
Mhm.
like, yeah, it's whatever, but it's like you're either draining people or you're getting card advantage, and both are things that you want to do because eventually you have to kill everyone, right? So drain is good, and getting card advantage over everybody, sometimes up to 3 extra cards per turn is also good. So
Well,
there wasn't really a
let's
negative there.
let's kind of introduce the deck as a whole. So, like you were saying, so Sivirus, Nightmare Speaker, and Cloakwood Hermit is your background, right? Let's
Correct.
kind of introduce the deck as like a whole, right? Do you have like what is the goal of the deck to do, and why are you doing what you're doing with the deck as a whole, including something that I know is a little bit controversial with a lot of people, and I think Dallas, you kind of back me up on this one. Some people believe that mid range isn't supposed to have combos in it, but some people do believe it's supposed to. And kind of, I do know, spoiler alert, this Sivirus list that Izlain has does have an infinite outlet in it. But kind of, what are your thoughts on that, Dallas? Hit me with it.
I mean, everyone knows me. I'm like the biggest combo fanatic of all time. So of course, I advocate that combos are a great way to finish games in your mid-range decks. I don't think they're required. We've seen that combat can win games in our format with decks like Gut and Dargo and all that stuff. So the aggressive decks have proven that it's possible. So it's not an absolute requirement that you have a combo, but especially with how long some of these games can go with some of these mid-range decks and just the raw card advantage you have, I don't think combos are necessarily bad to have, but obviously there are some drawbacks, especially specific combos. If your card quality is suffering, just to add in like 4, 5, even 6 cards that are combo pieces, it can get to a questionable place where a lot of people building mid-range don't want to play those combos anymore, because kind of one of the main ideas of mid-range is that your card quality is just better than everyone else, right? So there's justification
Exactly.
against it, but I still personally like them just because it's a very efficient way to close out a game.
Agreed.
I'd agree. I think that having it as a bonus is good. I think that initially, so like I said, I built this deck a long time ago, and it was just whatever it was. It was a pile of whatever cards I thought might be decent. It was before I knew what staples were and whatever. A few months back, pretty sure it was Gator, like said something about I didn't know you had that list because it came up in conversation. I was like, yeah, I've had it for ages, but it's not good. And then he looked at it and he's like, it seems okay. Like the skeleton, the bones are there, but we need to like look at it and change things. And I had already been, playing enough to where I had picked up on what some staples were and things. So I had already made some changes. And then it's just evolved over the last few months into the beast that it has become. But I agree with you that combo isn't necessary because like the linchpins of this deck are like Mirkwood Bats and Nadier's Nightblade and Falcon Wrath Noble, things that additionally help me drain the table on top of what Sivirus is doing, on top of what the other guy is already doing, on top of what the Malcolm Pingers is doing, on top of what the Gut is doing or whatever. It just cohesively helps you get there. Having some drain, and other effects like that are going to help with the overall life totals at the table. Most games that I'm in with this deck, like we're all sub 20 pretty early on, and then it's just a whittling, and then that affects people's strategic decisions as well. It's like, should I do this thing and leave myself open to the Sivirus player that's going to do blah blah blah? So, there's a lot of stuff that goes in. For me, it was mainly I wanted this to be a grind engine that is just like it's constantly playing rocks that ETB and give you some sort of value that you can sack to Sivirus to get more value, or sack to other things to get more value. Just like cards like Witch's Cauldron and Sirith Ungol Patrol that just like sack a creature. So you're making with, so I guess I should say, with the background, each turn you're going to end up getting 2 squirrels for the most part. As long as you have the background out, you have your commander out, you sack anything that isn't a squirrel. It's got to be an actual card, not a token, but you could sack artifacts. So, even artifact lands work. But at the end of the day, you're turning those things into card advantage and or drain, which are both key parts of the deck. It's literally printed on Sivirus. That's what you want to do. You want to drain people, you want to draw cards. So every single
Well,
piece is put into the deck to kind of synergize with that.
You're bringing up some pretty good points about this deck specifically, which I think a lot of people have overlooked. And you brought up a couple cards like Mirkwood Bats, I mean, Falconwrath Noble, Nadir's Nightblade. Specifically cards like that, Bloodseeker as well. I
Yes.
kind of relate those to the red creatures, typically in like Dargo Ketis and Third Path Iconoclast, that are like the pingers, right? You cast something, you drain somebody, right? And
Right.
these feel very similar to me, but you control these for the most part, excluding the Bloodseeker itself, but the Mirkwood you control, the Nadir Falconwrath you control. So you're able to like actively damage the field slowly but surely is the experiences I've had. But what are your thoughts on that?
So I mean that specifically, that's what I'm trying to do. I named the deck Aristocrats and Snacks because it's an aristocrat strategy of sacking and recurring things to drain the table, which is what Aristocrats has done for decades. You can do that in casual, you can do it in CDH, yada yada. And then Snacks is because it has kind of a food sub theme in the sense that foods are in a weird spot right now to where they're like on the cusp of being super competitive in all formats, but they're like not quite there yet. But we have a particular card, Cauldron Familiar, that interacts with foods in a way that we like. So having anything that makes us food will bring that cat back once a turn, which is a drain on the table and gains us life. Keeps us healthy, keeps them lower. As long as we have a higher life total, people can swing at us with Dargos and whatever. We don't give a shit until it's commander lethal, but you know what I'm saying. Um, so like just the overall goal is always to be draining the table every turn as much as you can, including little piddly combat damage. You can swing at these 1/1s. A lot of them, if they die, you don't care because you're going to recur them later. Or they have some leaves the battlefield effect that benefits you as well. So we tried to pack
Well,
in as many synergies as possible.
you're bringing up actually another really good topic, and if we can puzzle, let's kind of jump the gun here a little bit because I want to touch on some pretty key points about what mid-range is as a whole, but I actually want to touch on the next deck, Izlain, and kind of show like similar comparisons and similar cards that both of these decks have. So let's kind of introduce the next deck real quick, and once again, Izlain, you have a lot of experience about this deck as well because I've seen this individual play with you on your stream quite often, and that'll be Yami with Abdel Agent. So you guys share a lot of cards between the two decks, which I find to be very interesting. So it's kind of like a key factor that you guys have with like Mirkwood Bats and kind of slowly draining the table while you guys can kind of
I'm gonna
sit
make a
back.
hot take right here. Hot take.
All right, go
Mirkwood
for it.
Bats and Nadir's Nightblade being downshifted were the two things that make this deck and others like it possible. Without those two cards, it's not the same. Because you can use you can transmit Dimmer House Guard to get Mirkwood Bats, and I'm sure there's probably other ways to tour it out as well, but that's the one that I use. If you can get that card out, which I do pretty reliably, it just helps close out games because it's an ETB and LTB trigger on all tokens, and we make a fuck ton of tokens. So
Yep, exactly. No, I completely agree. And like one of the comparisons I'm trying to make with these two decks, right? Like they share a lot of cards, ironically enough, from Visara Seers to Bloodseekers. And the mid-range shell for these decks is very well assembled. Like I love the differences between the two decks. Like Yami's deck specifically, the Abdel deck, has a lot of hand destruction to really hold your opponents at bay. And then you have like the sticker outlet that has so many different variables. I kind of don't want to dive too deep into that because we'll be here for forever and a day. But
we
if you
did cover
guys,
that on my channel. There's a Let's Talk About Stickers
yes,
video you can check out where we went into excruciating detail about the stickers that we wanted to select. And I've actually made changes since then, but it still will give you the idea. Also,
exactly.
David Onklisor just put out a video that highlights my deck and a couple others that have to do with
Yeah,
stickers. He
sure.
just barely made his channel. He's got 2 videos. Go some love. He's got like 12 subscribers. Like, let's get him up. We'll
So
put
definitely,
that in the show notes.
yes, definitely appreciate it. David is always here hanging out with us. He's actually going to be on the next one. Spoiler alert, with Control.
There you go. So get out there and show him some love.
Oh yeah, definitely, you guys. But so something I wanted to bring up, and let's kind of delve relatively deep into this one, if you guys don't mind. I wanted to bring up because just looking at either list, you guys have so many cards that are 2-for-1s, 3-for-1s, that are just so efficient for what they're doing. And I kind of wanted to delve into like one card just as an example I wanted to throw out there to you guys was Fleshbag Marauder. Being able to enter the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature. I find something like this to create such a disparity between your opponents, and you kind of never really care about this. How has that been in gameplay with you, Izlain? Have you like pretty much like this is like so? Let me kind of gather all my words here. You have essentially all of them in your deck, but one. I see.
Yeah, I'm not playing Slum Reaper or whatever, the
The
most
Death
expensive
Trigger
one.
one?
No, it's
Or the Chain...
It's just the other 4-mana one.
The Chain
yeah,
Devil?
it's 4-mana. I'm playing Chain Devil, but otherwise I'm only playing the 3-drops.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I curve. That was really the only reason. It's curve.
But what are you guys' thoughts? Like, either one of you guys, hit me with it. Let me know, like, how do you feel like, because I find these cards to be proactive, right? Which is kind of like the big key difference between control versus mid-range is that I'm proactively playing a flesh bag, and maybe I sack a mana dork or a token for Abdel's sake. Now I have a 3-1 beater for 3 mana. Even though I realize that doesn't sound too exciting, a 3-1 beater for 3. Yes, I know, Puzzle. It's not a combo. But in decks like these, it's pretty exciting, at least from my experiences.
So
I mean,
since I know Izlain has good things to say, I'll talk about the bad things real quick.
Okay, so
All right. Hit us with it. Hit us with it.
The one thing that I would like to point out before you get into your point is that when I first started, I was basically told that edict creatures like this are control, and that they're a way to stop people from having their combo pieces or whatever. But I think that the main point we're trying to make here is that yes, both control and mid-range are essentially mid-range, but that control is reactive in the sense it sits back, holds counter spells, holds up. It's draw go. Control for me, that's always been the expression for in any other format is the control is draw go. They draw, and then they go, okay, pass, and then they hold up 8 mana, and then everybody's scared for their life as far as can they do anything. Whereas mid-range is more like, I'm going to play out this flesh bag, I'm going to play out all this shit to do things, because I don't care what you have, I don't care about your counter spells, I'm going to proactively affect this game, instead of waiting for you to do stuff to react to. So, that's a distinction I've been trying to make for a while. It's pretty clear-cut in other formats, but for some reason in this format, people are very hard set on everything that I've been doing and everything that a lot of people have done in this space is just control, and I don't like that. I'd like there to be a distinction.
So, yeah, fair enough.
Whatever you were going to say.
But yeah, so the notable problem with edicts, let's just get this out of the way. You don't get to pick what they sacrifice.
Yeah. TPI, Gut, Abdel, they just sack tokens and it does nothing. And those are feels bads. But when there's the one guy that's got a Gretchen and another guy that's got a TPI that hasn't made any tokens, and then another guy that's got a Dargo, and you make them sack them all.
I mean, sure, but Gretchen doesn't care at all if I sacrifice Gretchen.
That's true, but it's still making you spend more mana.
But yeah,
you're more concerned about the other players anyway.
Well, so specifically though, you guys kind of just said it. Sorry to interrupt you again, Puzzle. We're gonna have to shut up for a long time to let you finish this. But what he just said right there, more mana. Another key distinction about mid-range decks that I also have to throw out there is that you're not trying to keep things gone forever sometimes. You're sometimes just tempoing your opponent to gain that advantage, to build your engine, and then end it. Something I've noticed over time, with especially decks like Sivrus and this Abdel that have like just these disturbingly powerful engines, but they need to get them going, which I know you guys have seen before. But that was it. I'm sorry. Continue, Puzzle. Hit us with it, my man.
I mean, the reason I'm bringing up these downsides are so that you can talk about the upsides, because, there's both for these cards. Mainly, I see more of the downsides because I just really don't like mid-range. And I think that shows in how I think of these cards, because when I see this card, I see removal that doesn't target. I see 3 mana removal. It's sorcery speed. These are bad, bad, bad. But they fit the mid-range game plan very well, and they do what mid-range wants to do, right? They don't necessarily care if they're hitting a combo piece. They're willing to take that turn off to just develop this for some reason. Whereas, in my brain, I'm just like, why not play an actual interaction spell and just have that and hold it up?
Oh, we play those too.
But yeah, like, we're still playing them. I just have personal aversion to these, but they are undeniably effective, especially in some matchups they're very good. My main issue is that decks like Abdel and TPI are kind of fairly popular. A lot of these token decks, which just makes edicts kind of rough.
Got any of them. You're right, and you're identifying where our weaknesses are because it is literally rock paper scissors. Like, the combo deck gets off first and nobody has nothing, it wins. The mid-range deck gets a firm hold on the game and just gets to fucking grind out value, it wins. The aggro deck gets a firm foothold on combat and can just keep swinging out, it wins. So there's a lot of variables there, but that's why there are cards like Echoing Truth and Echoing Decay and whatever that just get rid of all those fucking tokens. The Fiery Cannonades, the Dragon Breath or Dragon Weapon or whatever the fuck it is. All those wipes, and then you got your Pestilences. We have Crypt Rats. We're running Crypt Rats in my deck. I'm pretty sure Crypt Rats is in the Abdel list as well.
Sure is.
And I like Crypt Rats better than Pestilence most of the time because it's recursive. And on another note, with the at least in my deck and other decks that are built in a similar fashion, the Fleshbag Marauder is coming in for 3 mana. Yes, okay, it is just doing the thing. So we got a couple people at the table that just sack some tokens, and it's not as effective as we would like. But maybe we also just sack a token and we don't care, so we keep the 3-1 beater again, like Gator said. But at the end of the day, we're still going to get more value out of that flesh bag because we're going to sack it to something that's going to give us value, and then we're going to recur it to do it again, and then we're going to get more value off of it again. So, like, there's no real downside. Like, yes, it's never going to board wipe a field of tokens, but it is going to continuously give us value, and it is going to hose that one guy who's just behind and only has one creature, or the one guy that's only got his commander out, or whatever. And maybe not hose, but it turns them off, makes them spend more resources, and as Gator was trying to say earlier, it is a 3-for-1 essentially, because everybody else is going down, and you're down one card, you've done all of this, and you're going to get some extra value off of it on top of that. So
yeah,
well, I mean, that's
card quality.
Yeah, I mean, that is the key distinction, though, between this, right? These decks, right?
You don't jam the Edict creatures in every single deck that's black. That would be the point we should make, is that Puzzle's right. It's bad in some scenarios, but in decks like this that can recursively use it, it is a form of targeted removal, even though it's not targeted, because it's just eventually going to whittle things down in conjunction with everything else that we have.
Well, exactly, right? That's the key distinction, because we have cards like Undying Malice, right? We have all these like feigned death effects, and all of these allow us to do exactly what you said, Izlain. We get to play this card out, we get to just let it die. Then because these decks are built around these engine effects, right? So I'm going to return this creature to my hand, I'm going to recast this creature, now I'm going to sacrifice it, but I'm going to supernatural stamina this card, and it's going to come back again, and then you're going to have no board state, and I'm just going to keep this motor running, right?
You did it recently with Rottide, where it was just like, Rottide came back like 4 fucking times, and we were just like, dude, can somebody get rid of this thing? Damn.
Yep, exactly. So, like, as long as you have that motor running, and you're giving it the gas, you're giving it the oil, so it just keeps churning, these decks I find to be very, very powerful. Because also too, if I could be honest, something I think, well, maybe you guys could disagree with me here. I think I don't know. Abdel doesn't do it as well as Sivirus does this fact, but Abdel does have the hand destruction creatures and such. But I believe Sivirus has some pretty cool cards. One card that I actually recently added to my list, which is called Dray Keeper. And I find this card to be incredibly innocuous because of the fact that it's just like a 5-mana 2/2 that just puts 2 squirrels into play. And I know you have it on your sideboard right now, Izlain, but kind of what are your thoughts on a creature like this? I think we know Puzzle's kind of outlook. It's kind of just like a, all right, guys,
It's mid.
it's a 2/2 for 5. It's a 2/2 for 5.
Yeah.
So I mean,
But
the immediate argument is that it's a 4/4 for 5 because you are getting two. It says so. It's a 2/2 for 3 black and a green. When it ETBs, it makes 2 1/1 green squirrel tokens. So immediately it's a 4/4 for 5, which is still not a good rate, but it's closer to being on rate because generally you want 1 power, 1 toughness per mana spent to be on rate. But it does have an activated ability that is not a tap ability or anything. It's repeatable. It's 3 and a black. Squirrels you control get +1/+0 and gain menace until end of turn. So the pump isn't so relevant, although it is relevant in Sivris just because of the fact that on Cloakwood Hermit, you're making 2 squirrels every turn most of the time. So if you do play this on a turn and sack something at the same time with Sivris, the next turn you're going to have 4 squirrels that you can pump to a minimum of 2 1s with menace, which means you're going to probably get through. But if you already have more squirrels, and this is, because this is the high end of the curve is pretty low. It's mostly, 3, 2, and 1 drops across the board outside of like a handful of 5+ drops in both of our lists, I believe. So I mean, you're at a point where this is at end game, or you really mid. It's mid range. So this is mid game. This is where you want to start playing these things. You've already created some sort of engine. You've already gotten some value. You already have Cloakwood and your commander on the field. You play this. You sack something. Next turn, you have 4 squirrels minimum that are going to swing around for 8 damage menace, which means some players aren't going to be able to block at all, or they might be able to block one of them. If you pump them even bigger, more things happen. They obviously don't have any evasion. There's no menace is evasion, but like they don't have the trample or anything on top of that. So token decks may be able to block a few of them without caring. But honestly, I think it is a pretty good card that we overlooked as we were building this. But you found it, and I'm probably gonna put it in mine. My top end is a little different than yours, but we're on some of the same stuff. So.
I find our decks to be incredibly similar. I believe the engines are the same. They're just like pretty key differences are just on how you like to put your mana in play, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But speaking of that, do you have anything else to bring up about the 2 decks, either one of you guys, or could we move on to kind of what is the differences if we can move on to the next deck?
I have one thing to bring up just with Draykeeper here. I think one thing that this card does very well for this conversation is showcase how contextual a lot of mid-range cards are. Like, you look at this card, and it's like, why would I play this? It doesn't...
You wouldn't in any other deck except for this one, basically.
It makes a couple tokens. Like, it's so minimal on face value, but like in this deck specifically, it's just a very strong individual card that has a lot of value on its own. It's not like some secret tech where it's like, oh, well, actually, it just instantly wins the game with this. It's just,
no.
This card does exactly what it says it does. And that's good enough.
There's a couple other cards I'd like to highlight real quick before we move on to the last one, too, that are, I believe, different from my list in Gators. One is one that came out with Wilds of Eldraine. It's Screen Puff. It's 4 and a black for a 4/5 with Death Touch. So great blocker, also great attacker. But whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you create a food. So just that repeatable value feels pretty good. I have yet to cast it, so I have not actually been able to test it, but I like it on its face. Another one that I've been considering for a while that I finally jammed in the deck is a spell from the first Eldraine. It's called Wolf's Quarry. It's 4 and 2 green for a sorcery, which sorcery speed arguably not great, but it is what it is. We're mid range. This is closer to a maybe not finisher, but like something that helps push us over the top.
I would consider this card a finisher. Definitely consider it a finisher.
It creates 3/1/1 boars. Those don't sound good, but then whenever they die, they make a food token. So basically, for 6 mana, you're making 6 tokens. With a Mirkwood Bats on the field, this is an immediate 3 damage to the table. Sack all of them. That's 3 more damage. 3 more foods come in, that's 3 more damage. You sack the foods, that's 3 more damage. So it's 12 damage for 6 mana. And
Yeah.
it obviously requires some setup for it to be that good. Otherwise, it's still good value though either way, because they're tokens. They're gonna either, even if you only had Nadier's Nightblade, you're not gonna get the 12. You're only gonna get the 6 damage, but you still get the 6 damage, and maybe you're gaining 9 life because you're sacking the foods legitimately. So just seems like a good card. I again have yet to cast this. This deck has been in heavy change, heavy testing for like 6 months, if or around there. So like it's gonna be hit or miss on some of these things, but like those are a couple extra cards that I thought were worth talking about. If you look at my list, I've already got a primer and whatnot to give you kind of anything that any questions you may have, or like give guidance at least on how to run the deck. But Gators picked it up and has had some success with it, so like I know it's not trash. It even got put on the cepdh.guide website in their library. So people have recognized that it's not nothing. It may not be Puzzle's favorite, but it's not nothing. So
I
we'll
mean,
take that.
Yeah, it's
Small
a blast to
victories,
play.
people.
Yeah, it's a blast to play. I will definitely say that. I enjoy playing it. Similar words to you, which I think you've said many times before. I always have something to do, and I never feel like I'm not in the game when I play a deck like this. So
It's always very random too. It's like it's not predetermined. People complain a lot in competitive settings that every deck just plays the same. It's like, just get to your A plus B combo and blah blah blah. In CDH especially, because it is kind of true. You're either getting to the A plus B combo of this, the A plus B combo of that. So like, I understand like some people get bored of that and they want to play something a little bit different. This deck, when you play it enough and you get good with it and it feels comfortable to pilot, you don't ever feel like you're behind, and you always feel like you have a chance. And it's just a matter of like, am I going to top deck the right thing, or am I going to get the right tutor or the right draw spell or whatever? And like,
Yep,
and it's different.
exactly.
It's super non-deterministic, but like it wins games. So that's all I gotta say.
Exactly. All right, Puzzle, you want to take us away on the next one?
Sure can. So the
Let
next.
let them know. Let them know the whole difference between what we're doing now. So
Yeah, so we're on to a deck that we think is not quite there in the current meta, and we are talking about Rilsa Rail. This is a deck that actually was very powerful when it first started seeing play, and we'll talk a bit about that. But also during that time, there were just a lot of mid-range decks being brewed and being played. Midrange had a big resurgence when this deck came around. And ever since then, it's kind of been dropping off. We don't see it very much anymore. But this is a
I've
Dimir.
literally never played against it.
Yeah.
Never.
It's a Dimir initiative deck. We're playing a lot of unblockables and ninjas. And we're just trying to get value off of the initiative. Just kind of play the game, you know? I don't know what else to say about the game plan, to be honest.
well, let me kind of say something, because I think we're all kind of thinking this here. A deck like this specifically, one of the key problems I think it has currently, which it didn't used to have back in the day, was a deck like this used to not have to rely on itself introducing the mechanic of the initiative. Because when initiative first came out, it's like you said, everyone had it, everyone played it. And now that that hype has kind of gone away, this deck is the deck that needs to be introducing it to the game. And when you're the deck introducing it, you're forced upon playing your commander. You're forced upon doing certain things that you may have not wanted to do before. So I think with that changing, this deck has lost a lot of its oomph throughout the meta.
I think a lot of people have picked up on the initiative and or the monarch and or enter the dungeon. So weird sidebar, but like after I played against your Abdel Sword Coast, I was like, dude, this deck's really good. I want to play something, but I don't want to copy yours and I don't want to use the same background. So I picked Dungeon Delver. And I'm specifically only using 2 cards that give the initiative, and then, or I think, yeah, it's 1 or 2 cards that give the initiative, and then 1 or 2 cards that give venture into the dungeon. Because either option has an option that has a, if you can make an infinite loop, you can drain the table out. And my goal was to not ever actually take the initiative or venture into the dungeon until I had the ability to do it infinitely to drain the table. And this deck, I think, is kind of more reliant on like having it all the time and to get value. Um, I may be wrong about that. Again, I've never played against this list. I've only looked at it on paper. But I also think that a lot of people have realized that initiative, monarch, etc., puts a target on your back. So if you're the guy that introduces it, well, people are going to hit you because they want the card advantage, or they want the dungeon advantage, or whatever the case may be. Now, Rilsa does have the benefit of being able to be flickered, I guess, to retake the initiative, and or being able to. It has a weird finisher kind of thing if you've completed a dungeon, but like that requires you actually to complete a dungeon, which maybe you don't ever because people just keep taking the shit from you. And again, as you said, like no one's playing. I can't remember the last time I saw the initiative on the board or the monarch. Like in the last few months, it's completely disappeared. So
Well, something puzzle. I want you to take this away from me, so I don't say it for you. Turns. I know you have some really good
Yeah.
feedback about that, and I really would love for you to introduce that because it's going to bring me to the next point here. So,
So yeah, one very notable thing about the initiative is that our commander costs 5 mana, right? So let's assume that we cast our commander on turn 4. We play 1 rock. If we take a look at the metadata, well, it was loaded on you. Here we go. We see that most games are ending on turn 8, 9, or 10. So if we assume that our commander comes down on turn 4 and resolves, and we get our initiative, then that means we have 4 to 6 turns if we have the initiative every single turn of venturing through the room. Which means we get through the initiative, the entire thing, once. Which is like, okay, we get through there.
it's okay.
But, like, a lot of these decks are wanting to get through this thing twice or 3 times. And granted, we can still do that, especially with the way that this deck actually functions. It's a greedy route, to be fair. But the way that this deck is taking the initiative is it's putting it into play, and it's not doing as much work to actually protect it, so much as trying to make sure we can always take it on our turn. So
Right.
we're playing a bunch of unblockable creatures and evasive creatures and stuff. And then if we have the initiative and we take the initiative, we still get to go through the dungeon again. So we can get through multiple times, but if we're relying on that as our actual win condition, it's going to take
Too
a
slow.
lot of work.
Yeah. I think compared to the grind engines that we've already presented with Abdel and Sivrus, like it is far too slow to get you there. If you're depending on initiative to win you the game, you're not winning that game. I don't think.
I think the big problem here it's so okay. Once again, if we let's just keep with the perfect world, right? We can hit into Crypt Rats, we can hit into Grey Merchant with the initiative. That will essentially lock up the game for you. So there are scenarios where, yeah, this is bonkers. But now let's be realistic and go with competitive play because that's what me and Dallas are about.
like
That's what we're here for.
I don't want to call anybody out, but like I built this deck and I was trying to prove it to be competitive, and I played it in a tournament. Like I didn't post results, but I still did it. Um, the only person that I can think of that plays this Rilsa deck proactively, like or often enough, or has talked it up enough. I didn't see them play it in a tournament. I saw them play something else because they admittedly didn't think it was going to do the thing. So, I mean, in that regard, like if it's not getting played competitively, then it's probably not competitive.
Well,
I
that's
don't know.
the thing. Like, this deck has actually topped a couple events. I don't think it's top forward, but it does
Well,
make like
excluding
top
the most
8.
recent event, it did. It did top. Well, this list specifically did not. The control variant of this list,
Yeah, which
which I
is
think is another.
yep.
Yeah,
Go ahead
it
and
is.
say
It
it.
is a different list. Yeah, it is a
Oh,
different
so it
list. Mid range versus control, two
yeah.
different
Yeah, I
archetypes,
think
right?
the
And
initiative
we're here to.
works much
Yeah,
better in control lists, but that's for
correct.
next time.
Yes,
Although I
exactly.
guess it's also for
But
this time because we're talking about it.
I mean, we've
yes,
already made the distinction that the two of them are very similar. There are two sides to the same coin. But it seems that that particular list is more geared towards being control than being mid range. Is
well,
what I'm hearing you say.
I think the elephant in the room needs to be addressed though. Let's be realistic, and I think this is going to be a big one that really has to be stated, especially specifically. And if I cannot hammer this home enough, and I know you guys are going to completely agree with me with this one, is in tournament play. Why would you ever allow your opponents any advantages? That's including the monarch and the initiative. You do not ever want to give any of these Abdel, any of these Gut, any of these Dargo players. I mean, let's be honest, that's the difference between Dargo bolting you in the face, right? Like, that's any advantage you give your opponent in tournament play may lead to an inevitable end, right? So, I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, so obviously we never want to give things to our opponents for free. The thought process, I think, for including cards that are Monarch and Initiative introducing in mid range is the idea that, for example, Monarch, draw a card. Theoretically, we're playing mid range, so our card quality should just be higher, right? So the cards on average that we draw should be better than everyone else's. Theoretically, same kind of idea with the initiative. And it's true to an extent, even more so with the initiative than Monarch for mid-range decks, I would argue. But you're still giving that out for free unless you're very much able to protect it. And if you're gearing your deck to actually protect it, you're probably playing more control than you are mid-range. And so these mid-range decks, I think, should be looking more to just use these as value pieces if you're going to play them and not win conditions. If you want them to be win conditions, you're probably looking to play more control than mid-range.
I'd agree with that, and I would also say most mid-range decks don't need these because you already have your own grindy value engines. I have a card advantage of the command zone. I don't need it from elsewhere, and I don't want to present it as a juicy fruit for someone else to pick. I don't want people, I don't want the Dargo to attack me. I want them to be like, "You're not the threat. The combo player is the threat. I'm gonna go hit him, kill that guy for me, and then I'll deal with the Dargo." Like that just seems smart, right?
Yeah, so
I don't honestly want to introduce any of these effects into play at all, just because I want to do my own. Uh, the thing that I've always talked about with mid range is that it's self-contained. You're basically just playing your own game plan until you have to interact with other people or until you go for win or whatever the case may be. If you're in a mid-range deck that does have a combo finisher, which my deck does some of the time, most of the time it's mostly just getting the grind engine out and going and going and going until you get there. And there's a lot of it cannot be overstated how many decision points you have, and piloting is a huge portion of mid-range. Combo and everything. Piloting is a big portion of every deck. I'm not trying to say that any other, deck or type, archetype, whatever, takes more skill than the other, but like mid-range really requires you to sit there and know what everybody's doing, know when to interact, when not to interact, how to fucking sack this thing, do that thing at the right time so you get the value, but you still have mana up to interact with the other guy. Because sometimes you're going to have that echoing decay in your hand, and you're like, well, I know I need this for this guy, so I need to leave the mana up, and I got to do this thing to continue to further my game plan. Like, I guess that's just Magic as a whole, is knowing the table, knowing the meta, knowing what people
Well,
can do and everything. So
I like to call it the punishing factor, Izlain. Like that's one of my favorite things about it. Like I literally like to just say, you know what? I didn't kill the creature when I was supposed to, and I was punished for it, and I lost the game. And aggro decks typically don't have that issue. They just swing out, and the game good. They have different problems, and combo has different problems. But mid range is,
Yep.
I didn't do this play on this turn, and I lost the game.
Yep.
That's a
I've had
big problem I've
a
seen.
number of those too, where it's just, you had the right thing that you could have done at the right time, and you didn't do it at the right time, and in hindsight, you see it, and it's a learning experience. And that's any part of any format, is just having the wherewithal to know that, like, okay, I fucked up at this point. Being able to, so a lot of people have like post game table talk where it's like, oh well, I could have won on turn 4 if this happened, or I could have won on this time. I've done it too. Everybody does it. You look at it and you go, okay, well, I could have won if X player didn't have this thing to stop me. What's more important, I
Yep.
think, is the way mid range, these kinds of decks can teach you other things to think about. Not like I fucked up because that, or I lost because that guy stopped me. It's because I fucked up by making this choice instead of this choice, and this choice would have won me the game. And being able to find those decision points where you did make a mistake helps you grow as a player. And then eventually, I don't know. I think people should play more mid range, because I think it teaches you a lot of stuff that you wouldn't learn otherwise. Puzzle may disagree because he doesn't want to play mid range, but he knows everything already, so
I've
whatever.
played a decent amount of mid range, to be fair, but one I'm kind of building my argument against initiative and monarch in mid range as we talk here, and I think one notable reason why these mechanics are so much better in control than they are in mid range here is these are zero investment resources after you put them into play, right? So for the control decks, that means that they get to hold up their mana, and that mana is threatening to everyone else, right? I have one or two kill spells and counter spells in hand. I will deal with your stuff if you try to interact and take these things from me, and you're gonna force it, or I'm just gonna get my value at the end of turn, just like I normally do. It doesn't change my game plan. And they're less likely to give that free advantage to other people. But for mid-range decks, it's like, okay, cool. So I get a little bit of extra advantage for no investment each turn. That's alright. But you still have to develop your other engines, because the game's just not going to last long enough for you to get the advantage that you want out of these mechanics, because that's not what your deck's geared to do. Your deck is geared to set up an advantage engine. So the minuscule card advantage or couple counters just doesn't matter as much for mid-range, because they're already setting up another value engine. And it's just kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Diminishing returns in comparison to the control deck that gets a free advantage engine that they don't have to invest anything into and risk tapping out and not having that interaction.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's the distinction we've been trying to make the entire show here, is the difference between a true mid-range, which is proactive, and a control deck, which is reactive. And those are all points for that, and that's the reason why you either play or don't play certain cards. Is that if you're in a pro, and this doesn't go for, because there are proactive and reactive versions of pretty much every archetype, except for maybe aggro, because aggro is just proactive all the time. Like, I don't think there is an aggro reactive deck. You're gonna have interaction, of course, but like, it's not, you're not sitting back and waiting. You're going. So aggro is a bad example, but any other archetype in the format, you have the choice of being, am I going to be the table police and stop people from winning so that I can further my game plan, or am I going to just forego interacting? And sometimes that's just because of the colors. Because I mean, honestly, Golgari doesn't have a fuck ton of interaction. It's mostly protection, and then blowing up artifacts, enchantments, and some spot removal on creatures. You got some wipes too, but for the most part, you're not sitting on a bunch of stuff where you're like, I want to keep mana up. Most of the time, you're tapping your mana out. You're just going for it. You're doing what you got to do because the rest of the table also recognizes, if they're good players, that you don't have it, so they're going to hold on to it. And that's kind of like the way that these decks have been able to squirm their way into the overall meta, is that because people recognize that you're in these colors, you're not doing and this. I mean, this deck is Golgari, my deck, and then the Abdel deck is Orzhov, both of which are notorious for having protection spells, some removal, but not really interacting too much on the stack. So, like, the other blue table in the pod, or the blue player in the pod, is probably going to be sitting on some sort of counter spells or whatever, and they're hopefully responsible, and hopefully they're not also like aggro or whatever. And there's so many variables you can't really specify how it's going to happen every game, but as a mid-range proactive deck, you are trying to push your game plan forward the whole time, and you're only holding up interaction if you have it in hand, and if you don't,
well, with that said, Izlain, I actually wanted to touch on the last part here and kind of wrap all this up. I have one last thing to really say. If you guys could touch upon this, which I think we can all come to an agreement, something that the three of these decks specifically do quite well, which is, in my opinion, a good mid-range thing to do, is keywords. So you're going to look at any of the three lists, and you're going to see a creature randomly have flying, randomly be unblockable, randomly have reach. Like, these creatures in these keywords matter. First strike, trample, they come into play
Death touch
more often than not.
Menace.
Yeah, exactly. Death touch. So, like, these keywords are by far stronger in gameplay than they do appear in these deck lists. Where are you guys' last thoughts? And then we'll wrap this up.
Flanking. Play creatures with flanking.
I mean,
flanking is OP.
Yeah, keywords are just another form of making sure your card quality is better than your opponent's, right? Like, it's just that little bit of extra free value.
Yeah, I think so the thing that was very hard for me moving from CDH to like CPDH is that, like, how can this be possibly competitive with just common cards? And it makes sense now because I've been playing it long enough. But to anybody on the outside, they look at these cards, they're like, 5 mana, it's a 4/5, it's got Death Touch, it does a thing, but like, how is this good? And yeah, it's not good because most fucking 4/4s or whatever in other formats are like 3 mana, and they have like a wall of text that does all kinds of shit, and you're like, yeah, great. This obviously makes sense. So when you're limited to commons, every little incremental advantage you can get is better by far than the incremental value you get out of stuff in other formats. So like a 5 mana whatever with Death Touch is immediately better than a 5 mana vanilla, right?
Well, I mean, you just
obviously
said it there,
there's usually other stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just said it there, right? Like, this incremental value, this engine, this thing that we're trying to build and make churn and run through the game is the goal of these mid-range decks. It's
also comes down to a lot
of
modality. It's modality, yep. And I preach this on my podcast and everybody I ever talk to. Modality is a thing that you want. Like some of the cards that came out with Baldur's Gate, like you see a guard approach, I think is one of them. But any of those ones that have like, okay, the one I'm thinking of, it's 1 blue. I think it is you see a guard approach, but it's 1 blue. Make tap down a creature or give a creature hexproof. In both cases, both of those things have some value to you, perhaps. You come to a river, like one creature becomes unblockable, or you do another thing. Some of these cards are just better than a thing that just does one of those things. And if you can get it for the same mana value, then you're ahead. So when you're pruning, when you're optimizing, when you're doing everything you can to make a deck as good as it can possibly be, finding those keywords, finding the modality, is going to also just get your deck there, and then it's just synergies and whatnot. So I've made sure that my list has every card is either creating me a body or token, a thing. It's got a keyword. It's doing something for the game plan, and if it's not, it gets cut.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, that's I think that's pretty much mid-range in a nutshell, you guys. I mean, we kind of brought up a lot of different topics and a lot of different reasonings why you're going to be proactive, reactive, why you're doing one or the other. Still a big fan of Fleshback Marauder, of course, because
The
I do
edicts
like the
have
three
done a
for
lot of
ones.
work for
Yep,
sure.
exactly. But Puzzle, with all that said, my man, and of course, Izlain, thank you so much for being here with us, my bro. I very much appreciate it always. And all of your links will be down below. And Puzzle, my bro, you have anything else to say, or do you want to just take us home?
Good to close it out here. Yeah, once again, big thanks to Izlain for coming on to our recording studio fake booth here for the day. It was great to have you. I hope
Yeah, thanks for
y'all,
having me again.
yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. We'll make sure to leave links to all of his stuff down below. We'll leave links to all the deck lists. Go ahead and leave a like down below. Comment if you have any thoughts on this. Tell us what mid-range deck you're trying to work on and bring to the forefront, and maybe
I am very
tweak
interested to hear
ourselves.
about it, and if you need help, I think we as well, me and Gator at least, puzzle. Who's this guy? But me and Gator can help you with mid range ideas if you have them. So
Yeah,
hit us up.
definitely depends on the list and the colors, but I'll do my best. If you want my opinion, I'll give it to you. But yeah, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see y'all next time.
Laters.